Zach, it seems like it's been forever since we talked, but I'm more than excited to have you back on the show, dude.
Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So now I've been trying to go through this weird timeline in my head of the route that Citizens has taken over the years. Because when I first heard of you guys was when y'all were on what was then, I guess, Mars Hill Records, which was kind of like a sub-label of Tooth and Nail. But before that, it was kind of its own thing a little bit as well. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it was.
Cool. So now since then... and then when you guys were that, y'all were just called Citizens. And then at some point, you guys changed it to Citizens and Saints.
That's right.
And then Mars Hill, which was the subdivision of Tooth and Nail, changed its name to Gospel Song. And so then you guys released an album on that one. At some point in there, you released a solo record on Bad Christian Records. And now you guys are the first non-hip-hop group to be signed to Humble Beast. What in the world is going on, dude?
Oh my gosh, I know. I haven't heard it timeline like that, but there's a lot going on in there in a short amount of time too.
It's like a friggin' James Bond movie, man.
It is, man. I know, man. It's been crazy. Yeah, I mean, because part of it is with Mars Hill music. That was with the church that we were part of, and so that changed when that church no longer existed. And so, and then just the transition from like Gospel Song was a part of Tooth and Nail still,
right?
And we started that label. Actually, myself and another guy at Tooth and Nail, started that label initially because we were thinking, okay, and I mean, and it still is this way for a lot of the bands, but. It was just that, the bands would be more focused on writing songs that are more congregational focused or like church songs. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, along the way, like with Citizens, we just decided that with just, I don't know, the many directions that life has kind of taken us in as far as like not being a part of the same church anymore and all being a part of different ones. Mm-hmm. It just writing songs for the church isn't something that comes as natural for us as a group anymore. As individuals, sure, but not as a group. So now we're kind of just focused a little bit more on just telling stories about our faith, and people receive that as in some way as like worship or congregational, then that's purely, I guess, accidental, or that would just be the way that they kind of see it. And I think that's really cool. But for us, I think moving forward, we're just kind of shifting. And so it was just, we were finding ourselves less and less fitting within like the gospel song sort of category that we were in.
Right.
And so with Humble Beast, it was sort of like a new adventure for us, and it still is, but an opportunity, one, to be the first non-hip hop group on a hip hop label,
right?
Predominantly hip hop label. But then too, I don't know, I just have always really appreciated the way a lot of the artists on that label kind of engage specifically with what's going on in their lives, whether that's exclusive to the church or even just socially.
Right.
And I think that's definitely a lot of things that have really connected with us. I guess you could say I'm excited to continue being a part of that tradition that they've created.
Okay, nice. Now, how did that initial contact happen? I mean, because I don't think anyone saw Citizens being signed to Humble Beast as being like, of course, that's the next logical step for them.
Right.
So how did that initially come about?
So Thomas, who is in Beautiful Eulogy and also one of the founders and the main guys at Humble Beast, Beautiful Eulogy and Citizens, we were playing a festival in New Zealand.
Okay.
And I was kind of sharing with him about just sort of the direction that Citizens had and where we thought we were heading. And he was sharing where Humble Beast was heading, and he just said, hey man, it'd be really cool to work together. And I kind of took that both as like, okay, just like a sort of just a kind gesture, that you say.
Yeah, it's the thing that people say. It's like, well, my people call your people, do lunch,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so there was like that element in it, but then there was also, I just thought it was almost like he was kind of joking too, because it's like, well, we're not a hip hop band, so why would they want us? But so anyway, we got back and I texted him. I was like, hey man, if you're serious about that, I actually do think there could be some really cool things about us working together. And he apparently was serious. And so we kept talking about it, and it just became more and more apparent that working together was going to be a really unique and special thing. And so it's pretty cool. I mean, I think really what they're doing, and I think this was kind of the thing for me, is that I think Humble Beast, while there is a lot of hip hop stuff going on there, I feel like Humble Beast is represented by more than just hip hop.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is like its content. And so and I think really what helped us to even think that this was possible is we played a good bit of shows with different Humble Beast artists.
Right.
And it's crazy how every time we do it, like we draw similar fans. And I think that just showed that, like, yeah, it's a hip hop thing or it's a rock thing on our side. But then it's also, I think, just the content of what we're doing that kind of connects us all together.
Yeah, it's almost like a way of looking and interacting with the world more so than just a stylistic thing. So I can see that. I mean, it was one of those things where when I had read the press release saying that you guys were doing that, I was like, I never would have pegged that, but somehow that seems right.
Dude,
like if there was if there was a band that wasn't going to be in any way hip hop or rap or whatever you're going to call it, urban, I was like, you know what? I don't know that I would have thought of you guys, but it's one of those things that strangely makes sense. It's kind of like when you see, like you see your favorite comic book movie is about to come out and you find out who's going to play the villain. You're like, really? And then you see him and you're like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
So I think that's cool. I think that's cool, man.
Yeah, man. And I think another part of it too is just like we've always kind of had a hard time sort of fitting into a lot of the different, I don't know, just like different labels that have been put on us because, you know, we're not really necessarily like a musically or just even just like the way that we've sort of pursued things. We don't necessarily fit within like and we never really have the CCM world.
Right.
But then we also we don't necessarily fit outside of the Christian world too exclusively because of our music or the content of our music being so specifically about God.
Right.
So it was kind of cool to just, I mean, the way that I just feel like Thomas has always communicated this is that, you know, Humble Beast is sort of creating their own lane. Mm-hmm. And that really, like, I was like, yeah, that's what we felt like we're doing. I feel like we're kind of creating our own lane. So rather than each of us creating our own lane, let's build one together. And so I think that's the other cool part about it is just that there's a lot of misfits out there in the world of music, specifically with what we're doing. And I think there's a cool way to pull us all together. And this is one of them.
Yeah, and I agree because I think in a lot of ways I always found it interesting that I liked your music as much as I did because of the whole like, you know, close connection to the kind of like church band, worship band kind of thing. Because I typically don't like worship music that much just because it never feels like there's a whole lot going on there and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it always feels like it's basic in some way that you guys weren't.
I get that. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I always was like, you know, every time I'd hear one of your songs, I'm like, yeah, that's why I like these guys. And so, I mean, you know, it's a good thing. And I like the fact that you guys are in a place where it feels like people are getting you. And I think that that's good. And that can go far for sure. Well, of course, I guess kind of the honest aside from just trying to figure out this crazy plot line that is your career. Another reason I wanted to talk to you, of course, was about the single Madness, which is quite good. And I was very excited when I saw that it was charting. So I'm like, yay, we can play it. So let's talk about that track. I mean, that's obviously not one of the Humble Beast offerings yet. That's off of the it's called Mirror Dimly is the name of that record, right?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. Which, by the way, if that's not a C.S. Lewis quote, it should be. It just feels very Lewisy.
It definitely has. There's a lot of C.S. Lewis inspiration going on that whole record. So.
Nice, cool. Well, yeah, let's talk about that song. Musically, lyrically, both, whichever kind of comes most naturally or you think would be the most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that song is unique because the way that I communicate is I'm very much a verbal processor. And it's funny, a lot of my friends make fun of me for this because I don't know many people that are this way. And there's lots of people this way. I just don't specifically know a ton that are this way. And Madness was sort of written sort of in the same way that I would communicate in a conversation. Because when I wrote that song and started working on the lyrics, I probably had 4 or 5 pages of lyrics for that song. And it was really, I think I needed to, it was almost like I was in a field of just a bunch of weeds and I just needed to sort of plow through them all to find what I was looking for. And so that's kind of what that song was. It was just sort of meandering through all these different ideas and thoughts and emotions that I was carrying with me, specifically really just feeling like that tension between believing in a God that I can't see and the constant wrestle between like having faith and that God that I don't see, but also doubting. There's like that aspect. And then there's the other aspect of a God who's near and a God who sometimes feels distant. And so I think really the whole point of it is just like, I think in this whole lifelong journey of faith, at times you can feel really lost because you get confronted with something really hard, something that's really challenging in life, and you're not really seeing a positive outcome in it. And so you look around and you just think, I'm having a hard time really seeing why this needed to happen. And I think that for me, specifically in that song, and what it's been like for my entire life, has been the piece of faith in God that has kept me from staying the course, I guess, if you want to say that, has just been hope. And that's really what that song is getting at towards the end there, is just knowing that there is something better coming. And when all the questions we have, if that's what it will look like, I don't know, but are answered. But beyond that, it's like where faith is no longer necessary, because we'll be face to face with a God who loves us and a God who wants us. And so that's really what that song gets at, because there's a profound mystery in that too, that kind of gets me lost too, even think in a good way, gets me lost in thinking about all the intricacies and the details of who God is that I will never comprehend on this earth. But I want to. And so that's kind of really what that song was getting at. And so musically, it's pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. And that was the intent, was just because the lyrics are pretty much what's driving that song.
It's interesting that you would kind of put that kind of the push and pull of those things, because and talk about how, God is kind of beyond our understanding, yet we want and we seek to understand him, which is interesting, because I think one of the things that I always kind of come back to is, I think a lot of times Christians get frustrated because they don't understand God, and it's weird, because I think what we really kind of want is, we want to be able to kind of rise to the level of understanding that God has, but yet it sometimes feels like we're trying to pull him down to where he's on our level, which is a really scary thing.
Yeah.
It's like, because I personally want God to be so far beyond my understanding, because if he's anywhere near the smarts that I have, oh man, we are in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Oh man, but that's cool, man. That's cool. I like that. So of course we kind of mentioned this already. I mean, this is the album that's currently out, Mirror Dimly, and you guys are already on a new label, and I'm assuming that you guys are already working on music for the next record. Is that right?
We are indeed. Yeah, we definitely are. It's been really, really cool. I'm excited about it. We're actually going to start recording here very soon, and the songs that we're writing are, and I think it should be this way, hopefully, as with each record, you're growing. And I always have thought that was funny. Like, some bands will say, oh man, this is the best stuff we've ever made. And it's really, they're just trying to get you to listen to.
Right, of course.
To, in particular, it's always the bands that have been around for a really long time. And it's like, all right, guys, we still are listening. We love the album you made 5 albums ago.
Right.
We just don't care about anything after. Yeah. And that could be the case for us. I don't know, but with fans. But I really feel like this next record, it'll be a cool change, and I'm really excited about it. Musically, I think the biggest thing I would say is we're just trying to push ourselves beyond what we've done before. And I try and do that every time. I have a really hard time making the same thing twice.
Right.
And so it'll be something new, and hopefully people will be excited about it.
Interesting. Well, with you guys being on Humble Beast, I mean, is there going to be any cross-pollination of like Beautiful Eulogy or Propaganda or Braille ending up on a Citizens track anytime soon?
Believe me, we're thinking about that, about what that could look like. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would say yes. You should expect to hear something. I just don't know what that's going to be yet.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Now, what do you think has changed, if anything, about the process, having gone from maybe the expectations that Gospel Song or Tooth and Nail might have had for previous records to where you guys are at now, as far as timeline or just the process or anything like that at this point?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've just learned over the years is just especially a band that like ours, where we travel a decent amount, but not a ton, not like other bands. And, I think with the shift towards streaming and everything like that, it's like, I think what I'm just realizing is that I just want to keep making music as much as I can.
Right.
And I think a lot of people will, and what I've come to realize, I used to kind of want to sort of reframe or constantly frame how I want people to view our music or how I want them to receive it. But I just find that to be a really wasted effort, because ultimately, people are going to receive it however they want. for better or worse. And so I think the biggest expectation is more just on us as a band, is that we're going to keep pushing ourselves and keep not wasting the opportunities we have. Because I'm not a fool. Like, I know that, one day, whether that's a couple years or many years from now, like our, Citizens, the chapter for Citizens might close. And so I want to make the most of every opportunity. So for me, like, my expectation with every record is that I'm putting every single bit of who I am into it. And honestly, I have to almost care less about how people will receive it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just such a believer in that, like, if we put all that we have into it and creating it and make it the best thing that we possibly can, I know, because we've seen it, and throughout the course of our career as this band, is that people will go there with us. And so I want to keep doing that, and hopefully this time invite some new people along to join in on the journey.
You had mentioned kind of putting as much of yourself in there as possible. Should we expect a new Zach Bolen solo record sometime in the distant future?
Good question. I hope so. I'd really love to. That's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I'd love to put some more of that music out there. It took me a really long time to finally get the courage and, I don't know, just the mentality I needed in order to complete that first solo record. And I feel like now that I've got it out of the way, I've got a better understanding of how I want to do it in the future. My goal in life is, I love writing music. It's my favorite thing. And I hope I can do it for the rest of my life in some capacity. And so, yes, there will be a solo record coming at some point in the future here.
The only question left is, can you find yet another record label to put it out on?
Oh, I'm sure I can find one. I'm sure I can find one.
And see, it's funny though, because if I hadn't talked to you before, and if I didn't feel like I knew you somewhat well and knew the reputation of your band, I would assume you guys were just terrors to work with.
I know, man. You might think that. We joke because we're good friends with the guys in King's Kaleidoscope too. And the thing that I think is so interesting for us is just that our bands are like, we're still small enough to where we kind of control a lot of like what's happening. And so we just, every time we've tried to implement somebody else or somebody new into it, what's funny is that we always just figure out that we're just either just not quite big enough for them in order for it to make sense, or the direction we want to go in is so specific that it's just easier for us to do it. And so, I mean, so much of it has been just us figuring out. But I know I think about that often. Like, man, people probably see this and think that we are just nothing but trouble. And we might be. You have to ask some of the other labels. Maybe they'd have a different story. Maybe they'd tell you we're terrible.
Well, see, but it doesn't help any the fact that, that Mars Hill and Gospel Song kind of, I mean, in some ways could be considered somewhat of an extension of the other. Yeah. I mean, so it makes it look like you guys have just been just everywhere, but yeah. And it's funny because I had the same reaction. I'm trying to remember who it was. There was some band I interviewed that their lead singer was the only founding was the only member that was, it was Matt from Spoken, and he's like the only technical member of that band now. And every time you see him on tour, there might be like one person who is the same from the last tour, but it's always somebody different. I'm like, dude, do you ever wonder if it's you? And he's like, yes, I do. I often look in the mirror and go, what is it about me?
Oh, dude. I know, man. I know. Music life is it's interesting, man. All kinds of iterations and journeys. I think about the Beatles. People always forget, like, they only toured for a few years, and then they spent the rest of the time making music together, but that didn't last forever. So it's just it's so unique, man. Making music with people everyone's got different journeys in life, and it takes them all over the place. So it's fun though.
Yeah,
it's a fun process.
Sure, man. For sure. Well, cool. Well, unless there's something else that you want to add that I haven't touched on that you really just need people to know, I have one other question, but
go for it.
Okay. Well, this is something that might not seem it's applicable to you, but then again, you are on a record label of almost exclusively hip hop artists, so this might work out pretty well for you. As the lead singer of a band who makes music with guitars, you make rock music, you go on tour every now and again, and music is your life. What is the least rock and roll thing about you?
The least rock and roll thing. Well, I would say that the least rock and roll thing about me is I enjoy being with my family more than I do traveling. I feel like the rock and roll thing is usually like go out for 2 years and not see your family and then come back and hope that they're not it's not in a million pieces, but I genuinely like spending a lot of time with my family. So I would say that's the least rock and roll thing. I was actually thinking about that today because I was like, man, do I have any other hobbies? Like, I don't have time for any other hobbies.
I know this mental conversation, man.
Yeah. It's like, man, I go out, I come home, I got to be with my family. All right, I don't have time to do anything else, So
yeah, see, I have the exact same problem because I have a full-time radio gig, working for an actual station, and then I do this show that's like it's just my baby. That's totally separate. But it's like I know all these friends who are like, oh man, like we go to the movies twice a week. We see all the movies that come out, and then we go do this, we go do that. I'm like, where do they find the time? I'm like, oh yeah, they don't work in radio. Now that's right. That's right. This is how I've chosen to spend my hobby time.
Yeah, exactly, man. Hobby is work and life. So that's what you want to call it.
That's right, man. That's right. Well, cool deal, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm glad to have gotten a chance to catch up with you. And when that new record drops, we'll definitely have to catch up and talk some more. And I look forward to it, dude. It's a pleasure.
Yes, please. Thanks, man. You too. Take care.
Awesome.